My topic for today is early childhood caries, and I would be presenting it as Early Childhood Caries ECC in a nutshell. I'll be basically talking about history, definition, classifications, epidemiology, etiology, the pathogenesis, caries risk assessment, prevention, management, and implications, and then discussing a few important questions. Now, when we go back to the earliest documented evidence of ECC, we come across an article by Dr. Abraham Jacobi way back in 1862 in his book titled Dentition and its Derangements. Now, since then, dental caries in very young children has been attempted to be described by various names and attributed to various etiological factors. Way back in 1911, Harris called it as comforter caries. It then came to be known as nursing bottle mouth, nursing bottle syndrome, nursing bottle decay, night bottle decay, and so on and so forth, where the bottle was given the main focus of attention. RIPA changed it to nursing caries, and finally, in 1997, at an NIH sponsored conference, the term early childhood caries came into being. Multiple number of authors have used multiple number of names and given various definitions for the appearance of early childhood caries. And while researching on these names and these authors, I came across an important statement by Dr. A.H. Wine. He says that I think we as a dental professional should accept the responsibility of educating ourselves, our medical colleagues, and the public about all aspects of ECC and stop hoping that a perfect name for ECC will do the job for us. So, moving ahead with the definitions, AAPD describes ECC as the presence of one or more decayed, non cavitated or cavitated, missing due to caries, or filled tooth surfaces in any primary tooth in a child 71 months of age or younger. Any sign of smooth surface caries in a child younger than 3 years of age and from ages 3 to 5, one or more cavitated, missing due to caries, or filled smooth surfaces in a primary maxillary anterior tooth, or a decayed missing or filled score of greater than or equal to 4 in a child aged 3, greater than or equal to 5 in a child aged 4, or greater than or equal to 6 in a child aged 5 is called as severe ECC or SECC. An expert panel at the Bangkok Global Summit on ECC reaffirmed the 1999 Drury et al. Definition of ECC as the presence of one or more decayed, non cavitated or cavitated lesions missing due to caries or filled surfaces in any primary tooth of a child under the age of 6 years. They also gave a lay definition of ECC as tooth decay in preschool children, which is common, mostly untreated, and can have a profound impact on the child's lives. They proposed various case definitions for ECC and severe ECC. Moving ahead with the classifications, a system was developed by Johnston and Messer in 1994, which classifies ECC into three main patterns: lesions associated with developmental defects, be it Pitten-Fisher defects or hypoplasia; smooth surface lesions, that is labial lingual lesions and proximal molar lesions; and rampant caries. The latter was defined as having caries in 14 out of 20 primary teeth, including at least one primary mandibular incisor. Then came the caries analysis system by Douglas et al. In 1994, where the presence of one or more patterns of decay was recorded. They recorded it as Pitten-Fisher pattern, maxillary anterior pattern, posterior proximal, which included the distal surface of primary canines and all contacting posterior surfaces of molar teeth, and posterior facial lingual, which included all buccal and lingual surfaces of molars without pits and fissures. Then came the Weerkamp and Weerheim classification according to the developmental stages of ECC. Stage 1 was the initial reversible stage, stage 2 was the damage stage 3 was the depletion, and stage 4 is the traumatic stage. And in 1999, this very Wine AH came up with his classification as type 1, which was mild to moderate ECC, type 2, which was moderate to severe ECC, and type 3, which was severe ECC. Now, going ahead with the epidemiology of ECC, the first country to approach nursing caries from an epidemiological perspective was England. Way back in 1967, Goose conducted a pilot study of 309 infants randomly selected from two locations and reported a nursing caries prevalence of 6.8%. That study was expanded to nearly 7,000 children randomly selected from 72 locations in England and Wales, and they found a prevalence of 5.9%. The global prevalence of ECC among children younger than 36 months has recently been recorded from 2007 to 2070 by L. Tentavi et al. And they have also recorded the global prevalence of early childhood caries amongst children aged 36 to 71 months. Based on this study, the global prevalence of ECC in children younger than 36 months ranged from 0.3 to 69.6%, and in children aged 36 to 71 months ranged from 6.3 to 98.1%. Now, among the children younger than 36 months, the mean prevalence was highest in North America, 31.7%, and South Asia, 30%, and the lowest in Sub Saharan Africa, 14.3%. For children aged 36 to 71 months, the mean prevalence was highest in East Asia Pacific, 68.7%, and Middle East North Africa, 66.2%, and lowest in Europe, Central Asia, 43.9%. Going on to the prevalence of ECC in India, a study in Indian Journal of Pediatrics in 2009 by Ganesh A has summed up all the evidences or all the studies that have been conducted in various states in India, and they have concluded that the overall prevalence of ECC in India is found to be 49.6%. Based on their analysis of different studies, Andhra Pradesh was found to have the highest prevalence of ECC at 63%, followed by Tamil Nadu, and the lowest prevalence of ECC was found in Sikkim, followed by Assam. They also gave a pictographic representation wherein the red states are states which lack studies on ECC, and the green states are those states which have studies on ECC, with an overall prevalence of ECC in India of 49.6%. Now, going on to the main part, that is the etiology of early childhood caries. Now, whenever we talk about etiology, this is the diagram that pops in front of our eyes. The Keys triad given in 1960 and the Newbrands tetrad in 1982. This can further be dissected into host factors, agent factors, substrate factors, and each of this has a multitude of factors inside them. Now, going ahead into each of these factors, first and foremost, let's take on the agent factors. Now, in the etiology of early childhood caries, a very special role is given to dental plaque, that is cariogenic bacteria. Now, the keystone pathogen theory of periodontist holds that those bacteria that play a large role in community but are of low abundance are considered to be keystone members in the microbial ecology. Members of the microbiome with low abundance may still be key species for complex community behavior. S mutans may be the keystone member of caries pathogens. There is a concept called the core pathogen concept, which explains this further. Now, the oral cavity is home to hundreds of bacterial species, most of which are symbiotic. Now, some of these bacteria are the core pathogenic bacteria, which play important roles, whereas the others are just ordinary members or transient bacteria that do not play a key role. When all or some of the core pathogenic bacteria act together, the whole microbiome structure can be disturbed and progress towards a pathogenic state. Now, the karyogenic microecosystem is a microenvironment that changes from a dynamic stability stage to an acidogenic stage and finally to an acidiuric stage. S mutants, together with other core pathogens, may thus be the key bacteria for regulating the microecological balance in caries. Now, why so? This is because S mutants has the ability to adhere to tooth surface, produce insoluble polysaccharides, rapidly produce lactic acid and substrates by a number of sugars, has good acid tolerance, and also aids in the formation of intracellular stores of polysaccharides, which can be used when the extracellular ones are not available. Now, there are also other bacteria which are involved in ECC. To date, a number of them have been identified. Scardovia vigaceae, Bifidobacterium, Lactobacillus have all been culprated along with Streptococcus mutans. And the presence of Candida albicans may increase the karyogenicity of S mutants by enhancing biofilm formation and acid production. Now, this gives a fair idea of the various bacterial species and their typical characteristics which leads to the occurrence of ECC in children younger than 6 years of age. At this point, a very important concept that we need to understand is a window of infectivity. Now, most of the studies they report an initial colonization of the oral cavity during the first year of life, coinciding with the emergence of the primary teeth. A window of infectivity, as suggested by Caulfield et al. In 1993, between 19 months and 31 months of age for MS acquisition has been reported. Now, the concept is that MS generally requires a non shedding surface, such as the tooth, to colonize. But now, more studies, especially the ones by Tanner et al. In 2002, using DNA probe technology, have detected the presence of mutant streptococci up to 70% of tongue scraping samples in children from the age group of 6 to 18 months. Now, this indicates that the tongue also may function as a potential microbial reservoir for tooth colonization. Now, this Streptococcus mutans can be transmitted by two modes. One is the vertical mode of transmission, and second is the horizontal mode of transmission. A study by Berkowitz et al. Has reported that when mothers harbor greater than 10 raised to 5 colony forming units of MS per ml of saliva, the frequency of infant infection with ECC is 58%, whereas when that went to 10 raised to 3 CFU, the frequency of infant infection was 9 times less. And at this juncture, we would like to also give introduction to a term called maternally derived Streptococcus mutans disease by Lee and Caulfield in 1995. Now, next, moving on to the substrate factors. Whenever we say substrate, what comes to our mind is actually sucrose, because it is the sugar that can be metabolized by bacteria, leading to production of dextrans, which will enable the bacteria to adhere firmly to the tooth surface and also inhibit diffusion properties of plaque. An important concept to keep in mind here is the Stephens curve, or the critical pH. And another important point that we need to bear in mind while discussing sucrose is that it is the frequency of ingestion which makes a difference. 4 or 5 food intakes will expose the body to about 5 hours of demineralization. Now, when we come to ECC and substrate, the substrate that we can think about is obviously milk. So, is milk the karyogenic substrate? Well, animal studies indicate that milk acts more as a karyostatic agent rather than a karyogenic agent, while epidemiological studies suggest that a negative or neutral relationship is also present between consumption of cow's milk and dental caries. So, what is it that leads to caries? It is the addition of sugars to milk that increase its karyogenicity. Now, compared to bovine milk, human milk has a lower mineral content, higher content of lactose, and lesser protein. But again, these differences are insignificant in terms of karyogenicity. But regarding formula food, most of them have shown to be acidogenic in vitro, and this is particularly true for soy based infant formula. Soy infant formula have low buffering capacity compared to cow's milk infant formula, and this is partly related to the absence of casein. This concept of substrate has been very well explained by Sao W.K. in Biological Mechanisms of Early Childhood Caries way back in 1998. And at this point, I would like to highlight the importance of breastfeeding and ECC. Well, a systematic review reports that breastfeeding in infancy is protective for ECC. So, how then does ECC occur? It is the epidemiological evidence which helps us understand that breastfeeding longer than 12 months and at night may be associated with increased risk for ECC. Now, how can you explain this? This can be explained that although breast milk has low intrinsic karyogenicity, the effects of breastfeeding beyond 12 months are more likely to be strongly modulated by other risk factors. Like what? Like oral colonization with karyogenic bacteria, ingestion of dietary sugars, presence of developmental enamel defects, and inadequate oral hygiene. So now coming to the host factors. When we think of the host, what we think of is the tooth, and a point that I would like to introduce you to is this term, that is HASECC. Now, primary teeth, when they are forming in utero, they are adversely affected by various insults to embryonic cells responsible for dentine and enamel formation. Now, the collective impact of all this results in various manifestations of tooth damage. Clinically, they will be representing as enamel hypoplasia or EHP, most often seen in the maxillary anterior teeth of the primary dentition. But it can extend to other teeth, including molars. Now, teeth with EHP are particularly vulnerable to one early and elevated colonization by karyogenic bacteria, notably mutant streptococci and lactobacillus, promoting early caries at the ecological sites of enamel defects. However, the mere presence of enamel defect will not lead to occurrence of HASECC, or the mere presence of karyogenic bacteria will not lead to presence of HASECC. It is the duality of a caries prone diet along with the presence of enamel hypoplasia which would progress to HAS-ECC, and that is what defines HAS-ECC, or hypoplasia associated severe early childhood caries, a term again given by Caulfield in the year 2012. Now, another substrate that is present is saliva. Saliva acts as a protective barrier. The pellicle basically acts as a protective barrier in preventing demineralization. It has various other properties due to its physiochemical properties and various defense materials that are present in saliva. But what is important is the flow rate of saliva. That is important, as oral clearance, buffering capacity, and antimicrobial activities are largely dependent on this variable, again very well explained in the biological mechanisms of early childhood caries by Sau in 1998. Now, with regard to nursing caries especially, this becomes very important. Why? Because the continuous feeding of sugars at night time, when the flow rate of saliva is reduced or lowest due to the diurnal variation, will increase the risk of caries in infants significantly. Now, based on just these three factors, the occurrence of ECC can very easily be explained as fermentable carbohydrates with high frequency of ingestion and low oral clearance when acted upon by karyogenic bacteria. Now, these bacteria are under the constant challenge of antibacterial activity by the crevicular fluid and saliva. But when they are acted upon by frequent carbohydrates, they will lead to acid production, demineralization, and this coupled with enamel hypoplasia will lead to breakdown of the tooth surface and early childhood caries. But we all know that early childhood caries is not restricted to these three factors. So there are other risk factors that are involved in early childhood caries, and Sau presents them as contributory risk factors, which could be environmental, chronic stress givers, chronic stress of the caregivers, health beliefs or caregivers, literacy. And based on this, a conceptual model for the risk factors that are involved in caries have been given by Fisher Owens in 2007, where the center or the crux is the Keys triad. This is again influenced at the child level by various factors, but at the family level by various factors, at the community level by various other factors. And these are all encircled and very importantly in time and the external environment, which play a very important role as a risk factor for the development of early childhood caries. Now, a recent meta-analysis and systematic review by Kartiga M. Muthu M. and co-workers has pointed out that there are number of risk factors that have been identified for early childhood caries. About 123 risk factors have been discussed in detail. So, what does this lead us to? This leads us to an important part of ECC called Carey's risk assessment. Now, what is Carey's risk assessment? Carey's risk assessment is the process of establishing the probability of an individual patient or groups of children developing carious lesions over a certain time period, or the likelihood that there will be a change in the size of the cavity lesions that are already present. Now we have various methods like manual APD forms, the CAMBRA, the digital CAMBRA, the NUSCRA, that is NUS Singapore-based Carey's activity or Carey's risk assessment test. These will very well be explained in detail in the session on Carey's risk assessment. And so I'll be moving on to the next important aspect, that is prevention of ECC or early childhood caries. Now, whenever we think about prevention, this is what comes to our mind. Three levels: primary level of prevention, secondary level of prevention, and the tertiary level of prevention. So, what is the primary level of prevention? Now, the primary prevention for ECC needs to begin before the initiation of disease, and that is the key to reducing worldwide prevalence of ECC. So, timely delivery of educational information and preventive therapies to parents and caregivers, that has been shown to be very effective in reducing the prevalence of ECC. Not only to the parents, educating other health workers has been given severe importance or prime importance in the primary prevention of early childhood caries. Now, the odds of experiencing ECC among children younger than 4 years whose mothers have received parental oral or prenatal oral health care is significantly less than those children in the control group, indicating that there is a protective effect for prenatal oral health care education against ECC development. Now, what are the other levels of primary prevention? First is optimal exposure to dietary fluoride. That is important and very, very important, which can be easily achieved by fluoridated water, fluoridated salt, milk, and topical fluoride. That can be delivered at home by having the child's teeth brushed daily with, very, very importantly, a toothpaste containing 1000 ppm at least of fluoride, using an age appropriate amount of toothpaste on the brush. A smear that is approximately zero point 0.1 milligrams for children under the age 3 and a pea sized for children aged 3 to 6. And dental visits for comprehensive care in the first year of life, and any child at risk should have a regular 5% fluoride varnish application. This is the primary prevention strategy that needs to be followed. Going ahead with the secondary prevention strategy for ECC, that is to prevent the progression or stimulating the regression of caries prior to the cavitation stage. This can be done by more fluoride applications, spit and fissure sealants, glass ionomer sealants, especially because of the fluoride release property. And then we have the tertiary prevention for ECC, which can involve both non-invasive and invasive preventive management. And what is at the apex of tertiary prevention? SDF or silver diamond fluoride is at the apex of tertiary prevention for ECC. Other methods include conservative caries removal, glass ionomer restorations, resin composite restoration, and full coverage restorations. Now, Fantomavet P. et al. Has given the conclusions of a WHO consultation on public health intervention against early childhood caries in Community Dentistry and Oral Epidemiology Journal in 2018. And he has grouped these recommendations to include the definition of ECC in the ICD-11 classification, early detection of ECC, emphasis on ECC with oral health education and interprofessional education, right? That is very important. And align ECC prevention with prevention of other diseases like childhood obesity. Develop a training package for dental and non-dental personnel to provide appropriate prevention management and strategies for ECC. Perform toothbrushing of children by a parent twice daily using a soft toothbrush. Use fluoride varnish and sealants with glass ionomer cements to prevent the further deterioration, and promote evaluation, surveillance, and research, including cost effectiveness for preventing ECC in different countries. This can very well be summarized by this pictographic representation as point 1, which is raise awareness of early childhood caries; 2, limit sugar intake; 3, perform twice daily brushing; and 4, provide first preventive guidance, that is preventive guidance in the first year of life by a health professional or a community health worker. Based on the education or the curriculum level, they have suggested a domain based education for ECC with 5 domains is what they have suggested. And also, the management of ECC has been stepped up to a 4D system of caries management, that is detect, decide, do, and determine. Detect for the caries staging and activity, decide a personalized care plan, do all the activities like tooth preserving and caries prevention and control, and then determine the risk again. That is on your follow up. So that's how this goes. It detect and determine is always overlapping, and that is what is the ICCMS 4D caries management plan. And to conclude, I would always like to say the 6 important points given by the AAPD. First is avoid frequent consumption of liquids, sugary liquids, that is sugar sweetened beverages at libidum breastfeeding after the first primary tooth begins to erupt, and baby bottle use after 12 to 18 months. Implementation of oral hygiene measures no later than the time of eruption of the first primary tooth. Toothbrushing should be performed by the parent twice daily with an age appropriate amount of fluoridated toothpaste. Provide professionally applied fluoride varnish treatment. Establish a dental home within 6 months of eruption of the first tooth, no later than 12 months of age. Work with medical providers to ensure all infants and toddlers have access to dental screenings, counseling, and preventive procedures. And educating legislators, policymakers, and insurance agencies on the consequences and preventive strategies that are needed for early childhood caries. Now, why all this? Why do we do all this? What are the implications if it persists and progresses? Well, there is a higher risk of new carious lesions in both primary and permanent dentitions, increased incidences of hospital visits and emergency room visits, higher treatment costs, loss of school days, diminished ability to learn, and diminished oral health related quality of life. A very, very important factor which would prompt all us dentists to go ahead and prevent this catastrophic disease. From your exam point of view, the probable questions that you could be facing on this topic, early childhood caries and its management. Etiopathogenesis is very, very important for your exam. The role of plaque, the etiopathogenesis can be asked in different ways, like role of plaque. There could be a question on HAS ECC because that is gaining increasing importance. The epidemiology of ECC, both globally as well as in our country, is another probable area where you can be questioned. Risk assessment, preventive strategies, and recent advances in management strategies. These are all the areas which you should probably highlight. And whenever you are writing any answer on ECC, what I want you to do is first give a small outline. It is not only ECC, any answer that you do, always give a small outline, and always for every topic, learn it as though all the researchers are your friends. Always associate names with each topic so that you always have a list of 4 or 5 researchers who are always doing work on a particular topic. So keep that in mind, keep their research studies in mind, and that is what you need to quote very, very frequently, because person who's reading your paper knows all these studies. So if you find out the common researchers for a particular topic, your area of at the time of writing, it becomes much more easier. These are all my references, and I can give you full text articles of most of these references if anyone is interested. And again, to conclude, I would like to say one statement that impressed me a lot, that we as a dental profession should accept the responsibility of educating ourselves, our medical colleagues, and the public about all aspects of ECC and stop hoping that just a name would do the job for us. So thank you very much for an undivided attention.